Okay, so this is punctuation quiz number 6 from my book Overcoming ACT English. So now what we're going to do is, this is the second part of the video with the punctuation quizzes. So we were on punctuation quiz number 6 last time. We were just starting that. So that's what we're going to do now. So number 1 says that we have to correct this one. So it says, for many Cubans, President John F. Kennedy's legacy is tainted by his handling of the Bay of Pigs invasion. So we have the option to put a comma there, a not semicolon, a colon, a semicolon, or a period. Now remember, a semicolon and a period are the same thing, so that's basically saying we have two of the same answers, which can't possibly be true, so we can automatically eliminate that. Now, it wouldn't be a colon, because remember, if we're using a colon, one of the rules, or one part of the many rules with colons, is that the first portion has to be an independent clause, which we don't have there. And then that just leaves option A, which is correct because you would put a comma in between that introductory phrase or that dependent. Think of it as like a dependent clause, if you will, if you want to do it like that, or you could think introductory clause or phrase is always followed by a comma and then an independent clause. Now, for number 2, we have to fix this sentence. If it needs to be fixed, this botched military operation in 1961 aimed to topple Fidel Castro's young regime. So you'll see here, again, we can automatically eliminate, in this case, option B, C, and D, because all of these mean the same thing. Remember, comma, comma is equal to, parenthesis, parenthesis is equal to also M dash, M dash. So you can't have 3 of the same things being correct, so we can automatically cross those out. But also remember that in order for us to be able to put any of these around in 1961, that would have to be a non-essential clause, which it is not. So there's no reasoning, there's no reason needed, I can't speak today. There's no reason that we need any of these forms of punctuation. So the answer would be A. Now for number 3, I can't really show the answers at the same time when I'm zoomed in this much, but it's we're going to see what we need to correct in the sentence. So, trained and funded by the Central Intelligence Agency, Cuban exiles fiercely anti-Castro stormed Cuba's shores but were quickly defeated. So right away I see that there's this non-essential clause. Remember, you could think of non-essential clause as like also the interruption, kind of like that little extra offset or interruption of information. The non-essential clause here would be fiercely anti-Castro, because that's like the extra information that's describing the Cuban exiles, that's referring to the Cuban exiles. They are fiercely anti-Castro. So we would either have to have parentheses, parentheses, or M dash, M dash, or comma, comma around that. So we need to check in our answer choices that we have one of those forms of punctuation around this non-essential clause, fiercely anti-Castro. And then the comma over here is perfectly fine because it's saying that we have this introductory clause or introductory phrase, trained and funded by the Central Intelligence Agency, followed by a comma, which is what we need. And we have the correct subject being referred to after, which is Cuban exiles. And it looks like there's nothing else wrong with that sentence. We just need to kind of make sure that we keep that comma and make sure that we have that non-essential clause surrounded by the correct punctuation. So let's see which of these options does that. So fiercely anti-Castro here is surrounded by comma, comma. Fiercely anti-Castro here is surrounded by an M dash and a comma. Remember, you can't mix and match around those non-essential clauses. If it's a non-essential clause, it has to be a pair of the same one. So it can't be that. And then fiercely anti-Castro is also another option, would be the parentheses, so that's okay. Now let's see what's different about these. So B says trained and funded by the Central Intelligence Agency, Cuban exiles. So they got rid of the comma after the introductory clause, which we can't do. We need that comma right here like it is in D. So that would be the correct answer. Okay, so for number 4, it says the embarrassment was significant for Kennedy. Not only had the mission failed, but it gave Castro a propaganda victory and solidified his control over the Cuban populace. Okay, so remember, you can look at the answer choices to kind of help you, and I see that right here the punctuation keeps changing. from all of these. And then there's some other differences as well, like with the comma that's right here. There's no comma there, but there's a comma here and a comma here. And then let's see. I think that's it for all the changes that I'm seeing there. And again, like the comma up there as well. So we're looking for what's the appropriate punctuation or lack of punctuation, I guess, for each of these options. So with the first portion, where we're deciding like, what kind of punctuation do we need here? Technically, all of these could be correct because you have an independent clause first. The embarrassment was significant for Kennedy, and then it kind of like expands or clarifies on that, which is one of the rules with the colons. And then independent clause can be followed by a period also, or a semicolon. So that's all good there. So it looks like the main difference we're deciding between is this comma, whether it needs to be there or not. So it says, not only had the mission failed, but it gave Castro a propaganda victory and solidified his control over the Cuban populace. So remember, the comma fanboys, we only need to use the comma fanboys if a period works there. So if we're using this, that means that a period should be able to work there. It's not that you always put a comma in front of a fanboys word. It's only if a period would work there. You can't say, not only had the mission failed, period, because it's like you're waiting for them to continue the thought. It's not a complete thought. So there should not be a comma there in front of that fanboys. And the only one that gets rid of that comma would be C. And then for number 5, it's perfectly fine the way that it is because we have the introductory phrase or clause for Cuban, or I should say introductory word or phrase because it could be a word sometimes. For Cubans who had opposed Castro, so that's the introductory phrase right there that needs to be followed by a comma. The incident created feelings of betrayal, followed by that independent clause, which is followed by a period. And then we have like the next independent, like the next sentence, basically, right there. So that's perfectly fine. Now on this one, where people might mess up is they probably would, if they did mess up, pick this option right here, C, where they would they would think that like a semicolon should work there because a period does, but you have to notice that they're adding and there. So that's the key difference there. You could technically have a semicolon and then just follow it by they, and that would be the same thing as not changing it. Like how we would have with A, no change. But the key difference here is that they added that fanboys word, which makes it not work. So then for number 6, the correct answer would be C because we have an introductory phrase, even decades later, which needs to be followed by a comma. Then it has these sentiments persist, which is an independent clause, followed by a comma with a dependent clause that starts with a verbing modifier. Remember, like a verb that has ing was one of those independent dependent clause things that can be separated by a comma. So that's why the correct answer would be C for 6. So then for number 4, right over here, we're now on the final punctuation quiz. I had this taken from like a separate like test worksheet that I had, so that's why it says like number 4, because this is not like the first paragraph of that passage. But for number 4 here, it's saying Maria Rodriguez, Green City's co-founder, draws inspiration from a community garden she visited in the early 2000s. Now here they're testing your comma rules, and so basically what you need to remember is like you're not just randomly putting commas because you feel like it. You always need to justify it. And there's no justification for adding an extra comma anywhere here. Because remember, the main ones you have to remember, there's a bunch of different comma rules, but typically it's going to be that you separate an independent and dependent clause by a comma, or vice versa, dependent, independent clause. And remember, there's like exceptions and stuff that was already discussed in the chapter if you want to go and review that. Those are the main ones, and then like around a non-essential clause, which none of that is right here. So there's no justification for putting those extra commas. So it would be F. Oh, and also like the list one is also popular, like separating items, 3 or more items in a list. So now we have for number 10 on Green City's blog, North mentions that these vertical systems offer a space efficient approach to urban food production. Now, remember, there's no comma in front of that, so it can't be the no change one. If we get rid of that comma, we should be totally fine, because then it would say on Green City blog, North mentions that these vertical systems offer a space efficient approach to urban food production. That works because you have that introductory phrase followed by the independent clause right over here. So H would be the correct answer. It can't be like we're not showing we're not gonna say like the possession, like the possessive form of North. We're not gonna say like North's mention that these vertical systems offer a space efficient approach to urban food production. Like that doesn't make any sense. And then mentions North on Green City's blog. You have to follow that up with like the subject North, like who's doing the mentioning. So it couldn't be G. So then for number 2 right here, biologist Dr. Lucy Hemingway, remember when you see those commas around, you can just kind of use that trick for the non-essential clause where you cross it out, see if it works. Biologist has devoted her career to understanding, no, that doesn't work. Like it's essential information that you have the biologist's name. So it wouldn't be that we could cross that out and put commas around it, so it can't be that one. It looks like I doubled up on that option. I think I meant to put like M dash here. I'll have to correct that. But yeah, we can't have that option, which is the same as H. And then we have the biologist Dr. Lucy Hemingway. Like that's not an introductory phrase or clause, and we're not having like dependent, independent, like clause in that way with the introductory phrase, which would be like what this is kind of like trying to look like here, I guess. You wouldn't have that and then follow it up with has devoted her, like that just doesn't make sense. There's no reason to have that comma there, because that's not an introductory phrase or clause or whatever. And then so we would just not need to have those unnecessary commas right there. So it would just be biologist Dr. Lucy Hemingway, because it's one complete thought that just like flows. We don't need those commas breaking anything up. Okay, so now let's look at this one. So then for number 1 here, I caught another typo. That's supposed to be a lowercase r. So in 2018, at the age of 29, renowned astrophysicist Mia Roberts became the youngest woman to receive the Orion Award, an accolade for celestial navigation's most innovative contributors. So here we have the comma right here. Seems to be something we're debating over, because you see it's like present in half the answer choices and not the other half. So we're deciding if the comma goes there. And also we're deciding if we need a comma right here after the word award. So let's see. Renowned astrophysicist Mia Roberts became the youngest woman to receive the Orion Award. That whole portion is an independent clause, followed by a dependent clause, an accolade for celestial navigation's most innovative contributors. So you need to have a comma in between those. So we would have, which one says that? It's B right here, because that gets rid of that comma that's unnecessary there, because we just have that one independent clause that doesn't need to be broken up by a comma. And then we add the comma there before the dependent clause right there. That kind of like defines or like gives us more information about the Orion Award. And that is it for this video.